What is going on, everybody? It's your boy Clint. Welcome back to the Die Hard MMA podcast. I am your host, as always. Thank you for joining me on this wonderful Monday evening. We had one hell of a night of fights last week, and here we go again. We are returning to Fight Island, and first and foremost, that means we need a bit of a change of scenery. We're back, baby. I couldn't be any more excited to be headed back to Abu Dhabi. Hopefully all this COVID madness is going to be put behind us because they've got everything sorted out over there and no more of these last second dropouts and last minute replacements. Maybe we can keep a couple cards intact, huh? How does that sound? Welcome in, everybody. We've already got 96 people hanging out. We've got Mario Indikov, Fizz, Gig, Pico, Grams, Grateful Dude, Kevin Wallace, Nick Sisson. We've got the Gaming Wolf 87, Binner 4112. How is everybody doing? A. Loomis, Alan Epstein. We've got, oh geez, okay, sorry, my chat just caught up and now it's way past me. All right, all 112 of you at this point, thank you all so much for hanging out with me tonight. I've got a treat for everybody this evening. We have a very special guest making his return to the Die Hard MMA podcast. We have the president, founder, CEO of US Integrity, Matt Holt himself. Thank you very much for joining us this evening, Matt. How you doing today?
Clint, how's it going, my friend?
It's going. I am pumped up, coming off of a pretty nice weekend, an excellent night of fights on Saturday, and looking forward to a big UFC pay-per-view this weekend. How are you?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, this main event, I think, is the most anticipated main event, and at least in 2020. I mean, this one really has everybody fired up. It's so rare in MMA, especially at the competitive level of UFC, where you don't get to pad that record along, as you build up, that we get to see undefeated champion versus undefeated challenger. They legitimately don't like each other. It's going to be a friendly stand-up fight. So excited for this one.
Absolutely. I mean, you said it yourself. When was the last time that we had an undefeated fighter as the champion versus an undefeated challenger? Since like the modern era of UFC, I don't know that it's happened.
Yeah, I can't think of one. I think we have to go back, probably not quite to the tournament days, but probably not that far removed.
Yeah, for sure. And these guys, they have not had an easy path to get to this point either. This is not some kid. I mean, now we all love Chimaev, right? We're all on the smash train with Chimaev, but neither of these guys got fast tracked. They've both had to go through the absolute, rung of MMA. They've fought legitimate challengers and legitimate competition to get to where they are, and they both floated up to the top. I can't wait. And fun for me here. Thank you for joining me. We're going to go ahead and chat about that one a little later on in the show. Did you have anything that you wanted to mention from last week's MMA event? Anything, cash on anything big, or any comments that you want to talk about before we move into just breaking down this card we got coming up?
Only that Jessica Rose Clark fight caused me quite a bit of nightmares at work, as we had to put out some substantial issues for regulators and operators in different states, because legitimately, the ref comes in and stops that fight. Someone from the review tells him that it was a clean knee. And at that point, the rules clearly state once you've gone to review, you can't restart the fight. Yet he restarted the fight. And that was the difference in the total, going under 2.5 rounds or over 2.5 rounds. I mean, still the same fighter won. The method of victory was the same fighter winning by KO. But the over-under round prop was certainly affected, and it certainly caused me a little extra work Saturday night.
And that's something I didn't even think about. And I can understand how that would cause you a bit of a headache at work. So I'm sorry to hear that. For me, I just don't understand why her corner didn't throw in the towel. It was completely obvious. Yeah. Now, the referee made a mistake. The main brunt of this is on the official, right? He messed up. But it's the fighter's job to fight. It's the corner's job to protect their man or woman that's in the cage and too tough for their own damn good. I don't understand how they didn't throw the towel in and save her an extra 2 or 3 minutes of punishment.
Especially she's getting married 3 weeks and her nose was already almost touching her ears. It was so jacked. I mean, come on.
Yeah, those wedding photos are not going to be ones that they want to display around the house.
No, that was some poor planning by somebody somewhere.
It was rough. The only thing I want to say is that we had a pretty dang good week last week. Saved it with a little sprinkle on the 22-1 Colby Covington in round 5. And that may have been extremely lucky for us to cash, but hey, we got it. Luck bounces both ways sometimes. And I'm a little upset with TJ Laramie diving into a guillotine choke, because if it wasn't for that, I would have had just a monster night. I had a 6-leg parlay, and then I had another 2-leg parlay with him and Colby Covington, both of which I thought were going to be rocking chair easy cashers until he pulled that little stunt on me.
Yeah, you know what? There was a lot of pretty decent sized dogs that got home last week. We saw several dogs of plus 200 or greater get home.
It was a wild night of fights and highly entertaining, in my opinion. In fact, yeah. I feel like last week's card rivals the one we're going to talk about this evening. I mean, that said, let's dive on into this week's card, because we've got a good one and we've got a lot to talk about. So let me get my graphics set up right here. Now we're getting away from the island again. We've got a returning face. And I'm really shocked, honestly, that Ibragimov is coming back to the UFC. He's getting another shot, taking on UFC newcomer Daniel Marquez. And I would love to hear your thoughts on this one, Matt, because Cadiz is the type of fighter that really I expected him to get cut. He's on a 3-fight losing streak right now, and I did not expect to see his face again. How do you feel about this one?
And somebody in the UFC really likes this kid, again, because when you start your UFC career 0-3, that's almost an automatic getting cut. And we're not talking about, hey, he got thrown to the wolves, so let's cut him some slack. Okay, Ed Herman was probably a step up for a 24-year-old. I mean, that's what he was at the time when he fought Herman. But, Deum Jung and, Roman Dolidze, none of those guys were studs. And other than the Ed Herman fight where he clearly lost decision, he got choked out in one and then knocked out in his last. So, I mean, he didn't even seem really competitive in a couple. And yet, for whatever reason, they're giving this kid the fourth chance here in the UFC against someone making their UFC debut. And here we get a guy, it's really hard to figure out what the deal is with Marquez, because it's his UFC debut. He's huge. He stands 6'6", or 205 pounds. It's just, absolutely huge. His last win by knockout, though, because that's kind of been the kryptonite for Ibragimov, was in 2015, and he hasn't fought in 2.5 years. This guy's last fight was February of 2018, so literally more than 2.5 years since he's fought. He trains at Damian Maia Jiu-Jitsu, which, is good and bad, because some of those guys tend to be a little one-dimensional, which doesn't really work that great in today's UFC. I was looking for every reason in the world to bet against Ibragimov, but in this fight, it really feels like the UFC wants this young man at 25 years old to get a win here, and they are feeding him, I don't want to say the easiest guy they could find, but they are feeding him a guy who's 9 years older, hasn't fought in 2.5 years, making his UFC debut. I mean, everything on this says Ibragimov should get his first UFC win here, but how do you lay $1.75 with a guy who's 0-3 in the UFC and didn't look very good in any of those fights?
I completely agree with you, Matt. And I'll be honest, I went ahead and took the shot. I'm struggling to find plays on this card, and I think we've got a live dog here. I'm taking a shot on Marquez at plus 140. It's a straight, plain and simple fade on Ibragimov, in my opinion. I mean, he's serviceable everywhere, but he gasses out. He looks to grind people up against the fence. He's going to be the smaller man in this position. We talked about how big Daniello is going to be. I don't think he's going to have a strength advantage. So when he's looking to kind of press and bully up against the cage, I'm not sure how well that's going to go for him. He doesn't have knockout power himself, and he always looks to kind of grapple with people. And I noticed he really sticks his head into chokes. He hasn't fought anybody that's really taken much advantage of it, except for the Da Un Jung fight that you referenced. He's going up against Marquez, who who trains at King's MMA. You mentioned he's, with Damian Maia. He trains with Fabricio Verdum, Shogun. He's a brown belt. This guy is big, and even though he's very, I'd say green on the feet is a nice way to put it, he circles well. He moves well for a big man. He's got a nice jab. He should be able to keep Cadiz out, on the outside as long as he wants to. And then when Cadiz comes in and sticks his neck under this guy's arm, I think he's going to scoop a guillotine on him. And we have seen Cadiz gas out against smaller fighters than this man in the second round and just have nothing to offer for rounds 2 and 3 multiple times before. I'm going to take the shot. I think Daniela Marquez wins this thing via guillotine choke in round 2 when Cadiz is just done once again and has nothing left to offer. And I don't know. I may be off here. Maybe Cadiz gets the win. But like you said, how are you ever laying 170 with Cadiz Ibragimov?
Yeah, absolutely agree. I just don't think there's any way you can lay it. And I don't disagree with your take here that you could almost blindly bet against him at that price. Knowing that, look, his opponent trains at a good gym. I really don't like the 2.5-year layoff. But at the end of the day, you're still getting the bigger man who you know is going to come in well prepared. There's a lot to like, probably. For me, it's dog or pass. I just haven't got there yet on the dog.
Yep, and that's exactly where I'm sitting. Definitely a dog or pass spot, and I'm going to go ahead and take it because realistically, I'm having some trouble on this card, Matt. There's a lot of really tough spots, in my opinion. And the next fight coming up is one of them. We've got Juan Espino taking on Jeff Hughes. Now, Juan Espino's the Ultimate Fighter Season 28 winner. He's 10-1, and he won the Ultimate Fighter about 2 years ago. He's coming off of a long layoff himself. I think he broke his hands, and he had to have surgery to have them repaired. He's a much, much bigger man than his opponent, Jeff Hughes. But Jeff Hughes trains with current heavyweight champion Stipe Miocic. That's all we ever hear about. This guy's athletic. He's decent everywhere. He's a mobile heavyweight, and he knows how to handle bigger men. He's actually got really solid takedown defense, and that's what Juan looks to do every single time is he either clubs you with one of these big, giant meat hooks he has for a fist, or he takes you down and pounds you out or submits you when it gets to the mat. Well, after a 2-year layoff, they've got Juan Espino sitting as a big, big favorite. He's a minus 280 in this spot with the comeback on Hughes, a fighter that I'm not really a big fan of, sitting at plus 230, plus 245. I dare say this might be another dog or pass spot, but I don't know if I want to trust Jeff Hughes with my money. How do you feel about this one?
This is a dog or pass spot for me, and I'm tempted to take the dog. To your point, he trains in Independence, Ohio with Stipe, with Cody Garbrandt, with Matt Brown. That's a good gym down there. And again, this is another case, and I worry about one-dimensional grappler. So there's nothing harder and more exhausting than MMA than grappling. And despite the fact that Espino here is the much bigger man, obviously the better grappler, we're talking about the 2011 World Grappling Champion, the 2012 European Grappling Champion. This guy's grappling accomplishments and accolades are just, we could fill a whole shelf full of them. He's one of the best grapplers in the world, but he's also now 39 years old. So he's almost pushing that 40 mark. He hasn't fought in 2 years. I mean, since November 2018, so almost 2 years. So a big layoff for an older guy. And he tends to be, his footwork isn't that good. His stand-up isn't that good. So at the end of the day, let's say that they start wrestling early. There is nothing harder for a guy than to wrestle at 260 pounds against other accomplished MMA guys. And training with Stipe all the time, that Hughes, at least if nothing else, has some decent defensive wrestling. And if he could just avoid getting subbed in round 1, I could see a scenario where Espino, with all that ring rest, starts to get tired. And these are heavyweights. It doesn't take a lot. Hughes just lands one big shot on a guy who's almost 40. I might take a little flyer on Jeff Hughes here.
All right. I like it. I like it. And I completely agree with you. This is a spot where you rewind 2 years, and I'm probably all over Espino myself, but can't do it with the layoff, with the surgery, with the broken hands, facing a guy who, I don't know. I feel like the UFC wanted to push Espino. That was the guy that they would love to have with, like you said, all of his history, his accolades. He's already kind of a star in another part of, combat sports. But Jeff Hughes is the guy that's got a contact to the champion. Jeff Hughes is the guy that he's got some years left in him. He might be able to do something here and, fill out some cards from time to time. They probably want him to get this win. I don't know. I do not like Jeff Hughes, and honestly, I've never been sold on him. So if you take that shot, you're getting the right price. Plus 230, plus 240. Roll the dice on some heavyweights. I don't hate it.
And we saw against Josh Appelt in his Dana White Contender Series fight. Again, he knocked him out clean in the first round. These big guys, it doesn't take a lot. You just need to land a clean shot with those 4-ounce gloves.
Absolutely. So I want to go ahead and give a shout out. Welcome everybody into the show. This is the Die Hard MMA podcast here at Odds HQ. We've got 258 live viewers. Thank you all so much for joining us. I have special guest Matt Holt on the show, the president of US Integrity. He's got years and years of MMA and sports betting experience. We love having this guy on the show, so everybody make sure you show your appreciation. Do us a favor, hit the like button if you can, subscribe here to Odds if you haven't already, and then give us a retweet out there on social media if you don't mind. I've got to give a real quick shout out to one of our sponsors, the boys over at GOAT Capital Sports. They're doing some really good stuff for us in all the other sports that are out there right now. Give them a follow at GOAT_Capital over on Twitter. Let them know Clint sent you. They've been giving out winners a whole lot lately if you're looking for action other than MMA. Next fight coming up, we have got a really, really exciting one in my opinion. Light heavyweight fight between William Nightmare Knight and Alexa Kamer. Now, this is my second bet of the evening. I've already taken a shot here on this one. William Knight, 8-1, coming to us from Dana White's Contender Series. Alexa Kamer, undefeated, 6-0. William Knight is, for lack of a better way to put it, Matt, he is a brick shithouse. This guy is solid muscle, and we lost Matt. hopefully Matt's internet connection fixes itself and he can jump back in here real quick in a minute, but otherwise hey, we keep rolling. There he goes. All right, Matt's on his way back. Man. There we go, got you back. I'm glad it was a short one.
It's raining for the first time in 6 months in Vegas.
Oh wow, really?
Yeah,
we could use some. Oh, you know what? Tyler Hanna, thank you very much. The shirts are on their way. I do apologize. I did a t-shirt giveaway a couple of weeks ago. For those of you that did win the shirt, we had one of my grandparents go into hospice and pass away this last week. So things have been a little crazy in the personal life. I promise you, those are getting shipped out. I apologize for the delays. So, Matt, we were talking about William Knight, Alexa Kamer. William Knight is just, like I said, for lack of a better way to put it, he's a brick shithouse. This guy has solid muscle, 250 pounds, cuts down to 205, and he is just a murderous power puncher. This guy is defensively solid and just waits for his moment, and when he gets it, he can put just about anybody down. Alexa Kamer on the other side, he was knocking everybody out on the regional scene, gets to the UFC and takes on Justin Ledet, a guy who, while he may be durable, is not someone I'm overly impressed with in the UFC. He's currently on an 0-3 run, and Alexa Kamer seemed kind of lost when he didn't fall over after the first round. He does have some flashy striking, he throws lots of spinning stuff, lots of kicks, but he's extremely hittable. I took the shot on William Knight. He was plus 155, I believe. And again, I'm going ahead and taking another stab at a dog. Alexa Kamer may be the guy who's got a higher ceiling technique-wise, but I think that William Knight, he's actually, believe it or not, got more experience than Kamer does at this point in his career, and I think he's going to land a bomb.
Yeah, the only thing that made me a little hesitant here is that gym in Independence, Ohio is sort of the highlighted American gym on this card. And we see it more and more often now where these gyms try to get 4, 5, 6 fighters on a card so they can all train together. They can really have these great camps. It's especially become highlighted during COVID or the pandemic where you don't necessarily have the ability to move around as much and have the same amount of training as before. They try to do these larger camps and then send a bunch of fighters to a card. And that's kind of the camp highlighted here. I mean, throughout the entire card, we're going to constantly revert back to this gym and continuously talk about it. And Kamer is one of the prize young guys at that gym. I mean, they're really excited about him, what the future is for him. I love Knight. And one of the things, people talk about regional fights and what they mean. And while I do like the strong style fight gym over there in Independence, Ohio, regional wins and losses and how they age is interesting. So the only loss on the career of William Knight is to Tafon Nchukwi. And by the way, Tafon Nchukwi just looked absolutely amazing on his fight on Dana White Contender Series, and he just earned a contract himself. So that one loss in the career of William Knight has aged very well. It's very rare that you see guys at this weight class, basically 205 pounds here and having a total of 1.5. And last time I looked, and I know it was early, the over was minus 125, but both of these guys are the exact same and that they go in there to get a finish. So assuming that when I go back tonight, this total is still, even if I had to lay minus 110 or minus 15, but right now it was actually plus 105 before I looked. Dude, I think I think someone's going down in this fight. These two just throw down. It's just the style of both of them, and they both throw bombs. And as Nchukwi showed, I'm not saying that, that knockout, Knight is chinny or anything, but when you have bombers like that at this weight, it's same thing. It's almost heavyweight. I mean, these are big, big guys. I think this one ends pretty quick.
Okay, I like the take, and honestly, I can't disagree with you whatsoever here. That plus 105 is still hanging out there, it looks like, and my only concern with that is that Knight has proven to be durable. If Kamer has leveled up, if he's made the changes that he's not quite as hittable, then maybe this one squeaks over that. But honestly, I'm right there with you. I've seen the tape and the shots Alexa Kamer was taking from Justin Ledet. He will not be able to withstand from a guy like Knight. I do think that this fight probably ends in the first round. If you get to the early second round, hey, that's just as good. So I don't mind that under 1.5 look.
Yeah, especially if it's plus money. If you could still grab plus money, I think the value's, for me, with the under there. I mean, if I had to take Knight as a dog or under at least gives me more options still at a plus. Because, I mean, let's face it, Knight's only loss is by knockout, and it happened pretty quick. And Kamer's a big guy who's going to be throwing big bombs. So at the end of the day, I like the fact that we can get plus money on someone sleeping in the first 7.5 minutes.
That's fair. It's funny, though. I love that we have these little conversations because my reasoning for taking Knight is essentially the exact opposite, that I'm saying I think Knight's going to land a bomb. He's got 2 third-round knockouts. He's been able to withstand everything that his opponent has brought to the table and then still uncork late in the fight. Yeah. And that's where, against a guy like Kamer, I feel like Kamer could be the one driving the fight for the first round and a half. Knight stays safe, and then once Kamer starts to slow down, once that defense starts to slip a little bit, well, that's when we get you. And I mean, I hope both of us cash because we both definitely can. Sure. But that's why I'm playing Knight, is because if that late finish comes, I think it's going to be more often Knight than it is Kamer.
And look, we're coming off another card with a bunch of finishes again. But one of the things to keep in mind for this card for bettors that like to play totals like I do is we're back to the 30-foot octagon for Fight Island, and we're out of that 25-foot smaller octagon they use at the Apex.
Absolutely. And you know what? Dana is convinced that it doesn't matter, but I tell you, we are convinced the other way. It absolutely matters. And I think the larger octagon allows for much more movement, and people will be able to avoid each other more often. And because of that, there may be less finishes. So we'll see, though. We've got some absolute murderers on this card. Speaking of which, our next fight, we've got Shane Young taking on Ludovic Klein, I believe is how you pronounce that. He's a short notice replacement here. Shane Young's original opponent fell out, and it's the first time on the show tonight you will hear the name City Kickboxing. We have got Shane Young 13-4. He is an absolutely intense fighter. This guy has constant forward pressure. He likes to bully his opponents up against the cage. Real long, stiff jab. I like that he attacks the body of his opponents. Good footwork. Good head movement. He threatens with level changes, and that makes sure to keep his opponents on the defensive side of things. And he went 15 rounds with Alexander Volkanovski in his UFC debut. Talk about being thrown straight into the fire here in the UFC. And since that fight, he's looked incredible. He's on back-to-back wins, and now he's welcoming Klein to the UFC, who also has some night-tight boxing, a sharp one too. He feints well. He's a very talented and experienced striker with 16 wins and 2 losses, light on his feet, big head kicks, fully capable of the knockout. This one's really fun and exciting in my opinion, Matt. I'd love to hear your read on it.
Yeah, I think highly of Young, and I liked the other fight he had. I thought that was going to be a throwdown, and it seemed that fight got canceled. I always get nervous and try to stay away from some of these last-minute replacements. And look, this is less last-minute than a lot of them that we've seen. Some of these 3 days notice fights that we've seen, because I always wonder what the weight cut is for these guys. And that could be such a determining factor coming in if they have a really hard weight cut or something. And we just don't know in a situation like this how bad, or at least we don't know yet. As we start getting into fight week and more news comes out, that information tends to come out. So, you talked about city kickboxing along with, the gym in Independence, Ohio. This is one that we're going to see over and over and over again on this card.
Absolutely. And it's a showcase card. Realistically, this one should be in New Zealand or Australia, because that's how they do. They load up these city kickboxing boys and send them down under for a fight card. And you know what? I'm really kind of interested in Shane Young here on this particular fight. He opens up at minus 165, and money comes in on him, pushing him up to being a 2-1 favorite. But it's been a landslide the other way. Klein is now down to just a plus 110 underdog. That line movement has me a little bit sketched out. I'm not sure what to make of it. I've heard of some sharp groups that will bet a fight the wrong way first to get that line to move the way they want it, and then bet it harder the other direction once they get the value that they're looking for. Klein is absolutely a live dog, but these city kickboxing boys, they're just so well trained. Yeah. Every single one of them has 80-90% takedown defense, vicious knockout power. They know how to pace themselves. They have accurate, sharp strikes. Getting a city kickboxing fighter like Shane Young at this low of a price tag, I'm interested.
And what we're starting to see more and more of is that these huge gyms are an advantage, especially during the pandemic when, maybe you can get all this specialized one-on-one training everywhere normally, but right now it's hard to get that. And having a gym that has 100 other fighters and fighters that are really good at a bunch of different things, it's been a big bonus for those type of people during the pandemic, especially to train at a gym that has a lot of fighters.
Absolutely. I completely agree. And honestly, I don't know much about where Klein comes from. I don't even know the gym that he trains out of, honestly. And the fear that I have is just his ability to finish. Dude has gone to decision one time in his entire career. Now, he's been knocked out once, he's been submitted once, and I know that Shane is incredibly durable. He's only had losses handed to him by decision, so if there's going to be a finish, you would like to think that Shane's going to be the one doling it out, but this opponent is no joke. So I'm going to spend a little more time researching this one. I think Shane. I'm going to lean Shane, but at this point, I'm not going to quite pull the trigger on it.
I'm with you. I always get nervous about these last-minute replacement guys, but at the end of the day, you were right. And when you opened up, we're talking about a guy who went 15 minutes with Alexander Volkanovski in his UFC debut. So he's definitely shown that he's durable and ready for the big stage.
Absolutely. All right. Well, those numbers just keep ticking up, everybody. I'm excited. We have got 368 live viewers. Thank you all so much for hanging out with us this evening. We are breaking down UFC 253, and my man Matt Holt is joining us, the president of US Integrity. We are looking forward to another great night of fights. And the next fight on the card is one that may be the spectators' main event of the evening. Diego, the Dream the Nightmare, not sure what he's going by these days, but Diego Sanchez is finally making his UFC return, fresh off of a win via knee disqualification, taking on Jake Matthews. Diego is an absolute legend in the sport, but he's going the way of BJ Penn, maybe even a little bit worse. Shout out to the School of Self-Awareness. He's got some very interesting techniques that he's been employing in the UFC, and he's taken on a real killer here in Jake Matthews, who's a young fighter that's kind of struggled to find his place in the UFC, but seems to be starting to put it together here. He's not even 30 years old yet, so he's got a lot of time still left to develop. Strong Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt, light on his feet, likes to play the outside. He's got excellent side-to-side movement, fights long, stiff jab, solid counter left hook, and excellent timing on his takedowns. And when he gets you on the mat, he just has vicious ground and pound. And Diego Sanchez is at 5-1, which is where they've got him lined, by the way, plus 500 here, minus 700 on Jake Matthews. If you rewind the clock maybe 3 years, I might take a flyer on Diego Sanchez. If I knew I could trust him to use his wrestle boxing style, either box this kid up, take him down, rough him up on the mat if Diego's slightly the better wrestler, because he still has that in his back pocket. But what we've been seeing is this weird Joshua Fabian defense. He's coming out doing this thing, and he just doesn't fight like an MMA fighter anymore. So unfortunately, I think this is the biggest stay away on the entire card. What do you think, Matt?
So, I don't know that you can lay 700 because anything can happen in an MMA fight. And we see freaky injuries all the time in MMA fights. So the idea of laying 700 or maybe even more, because this line just keeps going one way, doesn't appeal to me. But normally when a guy is minus 700, we see that total correlated heavily toward the under. But here we're basically 2.5 rounds. What was it when I last looked? Over minus 180. 2.5 rounds over minus 180. So they're saying that it's almost a lock that Jake Matthews is going to win by decision. And I don't know that that's true. I'm really worried about the durability of Diego Sanchez at his age. Look, he's coming off a win, but it was a win in which he got destroyed by a huge knee by Michael Pereira. He didn't win anything in that fight, and that fight wasn't going to be close. And my real problem with Diego, too, and because he has been durable throughout his career, that's the one thing we can all say. He's super tough, super durable. We always remember the wars with Gilbert Melendez and everyone. But at this point, it's the massive weight jumps that he's done. I'm going to go all the way down to 145 and cut all this super weight. Now I'm going to come all the way back up to 170. Those kind of things rarely work out. And to your point, Jake Matthews is only 26 years old, yet this is his 14th fight in the UFC already. I think it's a young man on the rise. In the past, he struggled at those times when he really stepped up. But Diego Sanchez isn't a step up anymore, and Jake Matthews kills guys that are a step below him. I think you could look at this one of two ways. You could either just say, heck with it, barring a freak injury, Jake Matthews is going to crush him. Or you could say, I'm not sure that the durability is there for the aging, and not just aging. He's almost 40 years old. This isn't a heavyweight in Diego Sanchez. And the fact that he's gone up and down in weight so often, I think Ferrero is going to knock him out, and then he hit him with that illegal knee and got disqualified. I think Jake Matthews may find a finish here against the Diego Sanchez, who's not too durable anymore. So taking under 2.5 rounds at plus 160 might be the way to go.
I like that look. I like that look a whole lot, Matt. And I'll be honest with you. Everybody that tunes in here and follows Odds HQ knows I do a show later on in the week called Total Madness, and I break down the overs and unders later on. So because of that, I don't always take a super sharp look at the totals before I come in here on this version of the podcast. I did not realize that under 2.5 was set at a plus line. That is an incredibly sharp look. And I really am with you on that because Jake Matthews is a submission artist. His ground and pound, like I said, is vicious. And I'm right there with you on Diego Sanchez's durability. And I got to tell you, the sooner Diego hangs it up, the better, because I am digging myself out of a hole sports betting here in 2020. A lot of that is due to the disqualification win that Diego got because Michel Pereira was my smash bet of the year, and I lost a ton on that spot. So maybe we can get a little bit back here. And ironically enough, Matthews inside the distance is plus 155, same as the under 2.5, plus 155. So kind of pick your poison there.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, I like it. I like it a lot. Moving right along, we've got a really intriguing matchup here. Another bit of a head scratcher for me, though. Brad Riddell, another city kickboxing warrior here, 8-1, taking on Alex De Silva, who is 21-2. Now, Brad, this kid's kickboxing is legit. Now, I know that probably stands. Yeah, you should expect that when he comes out of a gym like City Kickboxing, but he's a striking specialist, maybe more so than some of the other fighters there. His opponent, Alex De Silva, though, is a violent finisher, and he's going to have a 2-inch reach advantage here, Matt. Tell me about this fight. I'd love to hear your perspective and what you think of these two fighters.
Look, yet again, another city kickboxing guy and Brad Riddell. So right out of the gate, we know he's going to, he has a lot of guys training him, helping him prepare for this fight. I was kind of hot and cold on Riddell. I didn't know that he was the brightest star coming out of city kickboxing. But what an impressive performance he put in his last against Magomed Mustaev. That was a fight he was supposed to lose. He wasn't supposed to win that fight, and he really showed something. And now, we always talk about MMA where young guys hit this level, and they often hit it around 28, 29, where they finally put everything together, the striking, the defense, the grappling. And he's right in that age now, 28 years old. And coming off that last performance, I was just so ultra impressed. And I'll tell you, I've been down on some of these Brazilian guys who build up this huge record in the Brazilian regional scene. For Coelho here, it was mostly in Espera FC, which we know, that's where like the old Brazilian guys kind of went to die after they didn't have UFC careers anymore. And his UFC debut, getting submitted and dominated really by Alexander Yakovlev, wasn't that impressive. He did rebound with a win in his last fight. So, he does have some proven, ability to win in the UFC. But at the end of the day, I don't want to lay 325. But I watched that Mustaev fight, again, where Riddell is a dog, just what a really strong performance by him against the guy who, when you go back, is like 15-3, fought a lot of top level dudes. That was a good win. And he showed a lot in that fight. And I'm not sure, how does De Silva get the win here? So I always talk about path to victory with underdogs. So if you're going to take him, is he going to outbox Brad Riddell? I don't think so. Is he going to catch him and hurt him and knock him out? Probably not. He does have a lot of knockouts, but again, I think more than anywhere else in the country, and maybe some of the European spots as well, if they're over there for a while, the Brazilians tend to start when they're really young. They can fight as a pro at 16. So we're talking about another young guy here with a ton of fights, and it's not uncommon to see these 25-year-olds with 25 fights. And you're like, how do you get that many fights at 25 years old? They fight all the time, and some of the competition they face isn't very good. So it's really misleading sometimes looking at their record. So you have a guy you think has all this power and submission skills. He gets subbed in his first UFC fight. And in his second one, you watch the way he's striking, and you're like, I don't really see this guy knocking anybody in the UFC out. So at the end of the day, I'm not sure I see that clear path to victory. So I'm staying away from the dog. But I don't know that I can lay minus 325 with Riddell yet.
I can't disagree there with you, Matt. I think that I would be more than willing to lay that price or parlay Brad Riddell maybe in a different spot. It just, Alex De Silva is a kid that I think has that finishing ability. And while Brad has proven to be nothing but durable, I know he comes from a good stable. I know he's a guy that trains at City Kickboxing. He's with Adesanya. He's with Volkanovski. But he's only got 9 professional fights. He's taken on a kid that, even though he is much, much younger, has 23 professional fights under his belt. And I know Brad Riddell, I think the key is going to be his takedown defense here. He's got solid takedown defense, a great ability to scramble, and a good get-up game. Alex De Silva's, most of his knockouts and his finishing ability with the KOs comes from his elbows and ground and pound. If he cannot keep Brad Riddell on the floor, I don't think De Silva is knocking Brad Riddell out on the feet. And that, to me, takes a big, big win condition away for a guy like Alex De Silva. I think the line is a little bit too wide, but I'm going to have to go ahead and say that Brad Riddell gets this one done.
Yeah, I agree. The line might be a little bit too wide, but it's not. But even with us saying that, neither one of us wants to jump on the dog. It's one of those lines where you say, "Gosh, this guy doesn't even have 10 fights yet. Minus 325 seems a little steep." But at the end of the day, I don't see anyone jumping to get the underdog, and that's why we're seeing a line continue to climb.
Yep, I completely agree here. I'm probably just going to go ahead and take a little pass on this one. Fireball and popcorn, if you will. Enjoy a beverage, get yourself a snack, and just go ahead and let that one pass on by. We can probably enjoy it. It should be an absolute banger of a fight. But our advantage as sports bettors is that we don't have to bet on every single fight. So don't force it. Let's let this one just slide on by for now, unless we find an angle maybe a little later in the week. We have got 436 live viewers. That's the recap for the preliminary card. We're headed on to the main card. This is Odds HQ. Thank you all so much for hanging out with us. Do us a favor, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. Matt Holt has been kind enough to join us here on the show this evening, and we've got the good stuff here coming up. Let's see. The next fight is Hakeem Dawodu taking on Zubaira Tukhugov in another very closely lined fight. And I say another one, that's the wrong way to put that. There's only like 2 closely lined fights on the entire card. This is one of the few. And Hakeem is a guy that I just don't quite know what to do with. He's 11-1-1, and he's been relatively impressive so far in the UFC. But the competition hasn't necessarily been the best, and some of the guys he's beaten are no longer with the promotion. Zubaira Tukhugov, a bunch more experience. He's 19-4-1. He's looked nothing but solid in the UFC himself, but kind of the same competition level experience. I'm not sure which one of these guys is legit, even though they both seem to pass the smell test for me. Talk to me, Matt. Who do you like here?
I'll tell you one of the interesting things that I've noticed, and there's certain fighters where you say, man, the marketplace really seems to get him. And Dawodu seems to be one of those guys. So Julio Arce opened as a small favorite against him in his last fight. And that line quickly went in Dawodu's way. And I saw it go as high as, 55 or 60 on Dawodu. I mean, a huge from a favorite flip all the way to one guy being 60. And he got the job done against Julio Arce. In a match where you say maybe Arce had some slight edges, I mean, all things being even, and I thought it was a dead even fight, suddenly all the money went on Dawodu, and he won that fight. I think the market's been pretty good about predicting his performances, when they're going to be good, when they're not going to be so good. And that's a little bit, even with the Kyle Bochniak fight. I mean, I think we saw like a 170 open and like a 200 plus close. And again, Bochniak, a very durable guy, he went in there and got it done. So when the money seems to roll in on Dawodu, then I tend to pay very, very close attention. But that hasn't been the case here. In fact, people are betting against them. But everyone I talk to about this fight, I always say, man, this is a really good scrap. Because to your point, there's not a lot of pick'em fights here. And everyone always goes back to the loss by Tukhugov. Oh, he had an awesome fight with Carnero. What a fight with Carnero. And I'm like, yeah, but he lost that fight. And okay, I mean, sometimes you enhance yourself through a loss. This one's tough for me because sometimes you get a guy like Tukhugov who's coming off that KO win that he had in the first round against Kevin Aguiar. The worst thing he could do here probably is stand and trade with Hakeem, who is a devastating striker. I don't know what to make of this one. Tukhugov he has good wrestling, but he never uses it. He ends up standing and banging every fight, and that plays right into Hakeem. They're both 5'8". They're both going to kind of bang the same way. This is a really interesting fight. What caught my attention is, and I know we're in the bigger octagon, they both have power. They both have finishing ability. And yet the over-under is 2.5 over minus 200. They're saying this thing's almost a deadlock to go the distance. I'm not really sure. They both certainly can hurt each other here. So I haven't picked a side yet, but I'm certainly considering playing the under 2.5 rounds, especially in the plus 170 range.
That's not a bad angle to tank on it, because as much as Hakeem is a vicious finisher, he's got that power, he's underrated strong. I've seen him clipped. I've seen him
Yeah.
wobbled. He's been wobbled by some of these guys before, and Zubaira Tukhugov, kind of like you said, he's coming off a big knockout win. And what I've noticed he does really well is he plays the outside. He's extremely elusive, and then when he gets in, he is all in, and he's extremely fast. If he hurts Hakeem Dawodu, I think he could be well on his way to another knockout. And similarly, Hakeem, we've seen he's capable of just roughing people up and pinning them up against the fence and just mauling them with elbows from in the clinch. I think you're absolutely right. Both guys absolutely have a chance, an opportunity to finish this fight. Plus 175 is not a bad line. I was starting to lean more towards Tukhugov myself when it comes towards a pick'em fight, simply because of the durability concerns I have with Hakeem. But Hakeem's got a 5-inch reach advantage. And then I looked up the stats, and even though I say that Zubaira Tukhugov is a elusive fighter, he averages 2.58 significant strikes a minute and absorbs 2.07. So he's only outstriking his opposition by about a half significant strike per minute. Hakeem, on the other hand, outputs 5.28 landed a minute and absorbs 2.3. So he's been outlanding his competition so far by a whopping 2.5 significant strikes per minute, almost a full 3 significant strikes per minute. So honestly, this is one that I think a pass is definitely warranted, because Hakeem could just maul Tukhugov. Tukhugov could use that output against Hakeem and then land a big knockout punch and sit him down. Maybe the under is the safest way to play it.
And I think Hakeem gets a bad rep here for his level of competition. People say he hasn't fought the toughest guys, but Julio Arce was a tough fight. Kyle Bochniak was a tough fight. And don't forget, before coming to the UFC, he fought several times. I mean, maybe 6 or 7 times in World Series of Fighting, where he beat Steven Seiler. He had those 2 fights with Murat Magomedov, where the first fight was a draw with Magomedov, but Hakeem came back to knock him out in the second fight. And he was a beast in WSOF. I think he won like 4 or 5 in a row before he fought Magomedov. So, I mean, I actually think Hakeem's, he doesn't have one of those regional built-up records. WSOF and UFC, basically, those are 2 pretty legit organizations.
He's earned every single win on his record.
Correct.
Yeah. That one, honestly, I don't think I'm going to end up taking a side on. I think I feel that one needs to stay a pass for me. And sometimes I get that itchy trigger finger. It's a little difficult for me because this one's a pick 'em for a reason. And if you pick a side on this fight, you're flipping a coin. Just understand that. So if you get, plus 115, plus 120 on Hakeem, if the money keeps on coming in on Zubaira Tukhugov, I don't mind that, because then you're flipping that coin with a little bit of extra dog money. But if it stays around this minus 110 range, I'm not planning on touching either of these fighters.
I'm with you. If the money continues to roll in on the Russian here, and you can get plus 115 or 20, or maybe even a little better, then I certainly would take a shot. If not, I may lean toward the under, because it's certainly not out of the realm of possibility one guy gets a finish. But right now at this price, and the odds say it, you're literally flipping coins. And I just don't see a stylistic advantage for either guy here.
Agreed. Now, we've got another short notice replacement here in this next fight, and a really interesting one. Ketlen Viera, 10-1, taking on Sijara Eubanks, maybe the most confusing women's MMA fighter on the roster. Sarge is 7-4. And I just cannot seem to figure her out, man. Every single time I think that she's going to mail it in, she comes out and looks like a dominant champion-level fighter. And then every time I think she's going to bounce up that kind of a performance and give me a good win, she just lays on her back and does nothing for the entire fight. I cannot pick Sarge to save my soul right now. Ketlen Viera, she's an exciting prospect. She's big for the division. She hits hard. She's kind of fast. She's got good hands. And she takes down a lot of her opponents, roughs them up, fully capable of finishing both on the feet and on the mat. Viera's a very exciting prospect. But we just saw Sarge come through as a big underdog, and here she is in the same exact role. She's gotten a little bit of respect this time. She's sitting around plus 150 right now. Sarge is going to be the underdog to Viera's minus 170. What are you feeling on this one?
I just feel like as Eubanks continues to get older, not that she's old yet, I think she's like 34, 35, so she's not really old yet, but she's getting older. and she is so short for the division that style really, she has a problem with everyone she fights from a striking standpoint because she has to get so far inside. And what we've seen with Vieira is her striking at range is her best quality. She did get knocked out in her last fight in the first round, but that's Irene Aldana, who's actually going to be main eventing a fight here. So, I mean, you could certainly excuse that loss at the highest level here. And you like the fact that Vieira is going to go in there and strike. So I think had that knockout not happened, and of course, look, it's easy to say had that knockout not happened, I would really like Vieira's height and reach and range here. And I would think that this is a hard fight for Eubanks to win because while her grappling's good, it's not as good as you think it is. She's not a grappling whiz, and she doesn't tend to ground that many people out. And on the other side of it, she's really tough, and she depends sometimes too much on that toughness. Eubanks has never been KO'd. In fact, I don't think she's ever been stopped, if I'm correct.
She is not.
Yeah, so sometimes she just relies on tough, and she eats shots. But in this case, Vieira is going to be able to pick her apart from a long distance. And this is a really accomplished striker in Vieira. The only thing I'm a little nervous of is sometimes fighters get a little gun shy coming in off the first time ever being knocked out. So we'll have to see at the end of the day, what is she like coming in? Does she have that same aggressiveness? Because that's what made her really special. That's what will get her the win here, is that ability to stand and trade with a scary Eubanks, who is, she looks mean and tough, and she wants to get in there after you. It's really important that you're willing to stand in the pocket, use that range, move out. I think if she does that, it's a long night for Eubanks. The odds may be a little steep, but I'm not in love with Eubanks as much as some people. And that 5'4" in this division is tough to overcome with that reach.
Well, and for me, I think it's the fact that she can grapple. Sijara Eubanks managed to pull a win over Julia Avila, the Raging Panda, a fighter that I'm super high on. But Avila doesn't have much in the way of wrestling. And that is something that we've seen Ketlen Viera is more than capable of doing. She did get suckered into standing and trading in her last fight, like you mentioned. But more often than not, she's been looking to take her opponents down. In fact, looking at her record here, you realize she took down and submitted Sarah McMahon. And to me, that speaks volumes to what this woman is capable of in the ground game. If you remove that ground advantage for Sijara Eubanks, I'm not sure what else she really can bring to the table. She doesn't have the kind of scary power striking that you need to take out a woman like Vieira. She does have 2 knockouts, but her most of her wins, 4 decision wins, 4 decision losses. She is durable. She is tough. And I know a lot of you follow me on Twitter. If you don't, follow me at Die Hard MMA Pod over on Twitter. I tweeted out after her last fight, Matt, that we have to stop talking about the weight issues for Sijara Eubanks. That's something that I heard from every single podcaster, every single sports bettor that does MMA. Sijara Eubanks can't make the weight. She struggles with the weight cut. She looked damn good on the scales in her last fight. I think she has plugged that hole. I don't think that's an issue anymore. But this is an extremely fast turnaround. And because of that, I have a sneaky feeling that that problem might raise its head one more time here because she doesn't have a full camp. Even if she does have a new system as far as cutting herself down, getting to the right weight, she fought on September 12th, so just, 10 days ago? And now she's going to be taking on another opponent, resetting that clock. How much did she balloon up after that fight? How much cheesecake did she eat? Because I know if I won a fight as a plus 300 underdog, I'd be hitting the buffet pretty hard.
Yeah, absolutely. Those are some great points. At the end of the day, it's Vieira or pass for me.
I completely agree. And honestly, this is a situation, I don't do this a lot, especially in women's MMA. I'll tell you, Matt, last year, one calendar rewind here, I was the women's MMA whisperer. I had such a solid read on all the hot women fighters. I was cashing bets left and right. 2020 has been the exact opposite. I've been hit by every single derailed hype train. Every single armbar from guard has gone against me. So I'm a little gun shy when it comes to women's MMA right now. But I'm extremely tempted to lay that minus 170. And if I don't do that, I'm highly tempted to sprinkle a little something on Vieira winning by knockout. Inside the distance is plus plus 353, and I think she might be the type of fighter that's capable of taking everything Sarge has, and if this short turnaround messes with Sarge at all, I think Vieira gets back to her finishing ways.
Yeah, I'm with you. I really like her in this fight too. And I just think Eubanks, again, to your point, we're talking about a fighter in Vieira that has a strong wrestling base and is going to have such significant height and reach advantages and knows how to use them in the striking game.
Absolutely. And knowing how to use it is a big key factor, because you see a lot of these tall, lanky fighters that don't quite put it to good use. She absolutely does. And Sarge doesn't have the frame, I don't feel, to make her pay for it, where her last opponent was able to make her pay for it because she had the know-how, the boxing ability, the length. I don't think Sarge is going to be able to pose those same kind of problems.
Look, when you're 5'4", you have to be like Jessica Andrade. Head movement, vicious striking, coming back. All we ever talk about with Eubanks is how tough she is. A lot of times tough translates to block punches with my face,
That's a valid point. You don't ever want your best quality to be your toughness, because eventually that goes too.
Yeah.
All right, our next fight. We are getting close to the top of this card already, believe it or not. We've got a flyweight tilt between Kara France and Brandon Royval. Once again, you're going to hear that name, City Kickboxing. Kara France, 21-8 for his professional record. This guy's got high output, intelligent striking offense. He averages 5.27 significant strikes per minute and only absorbs 3.79. Really solid defensively striking is Kara France. He's another one of these 90% takedown defense type of fighters, but he always seems to be in close fights. It seems like he's doing everything right. It seems like he should just be dominating, but it seems like he goes to a split decision almost every time out. And now he's taking on Brandon Royval, who's kind of the newest, hottest kid on the block at flyweight. 11-4, long, rangy, big knees. He can throw those up the middle without any type of warning. Heavy leg kicks, creative, wild striking, and a nasty submission game. How are you looking to play this one, Matt?
I actually like Royval, and I'm with you. I think that sometimes we have these guys, and he kind of reminds me of a little bit of Mirsad Bektic last week, except in a different way. Bektic, it's the same story over and over again. He has this amazing ground game, but doesn't have the submission game to go with it. He gasses, and he tends to get hurt and caught late. And he ended up getting finished again last week by Damon Jackson, is a huge favorite. Bektic was, and the same thing in his fight back. Who's the guy that it? Darren Elkins. Yeah, that's right. Darren Elkins. Again, he was getting dominated in that fight and came back. And this is kind of the case with Kara France for me. He comes out, he looks so great early, and he doesn't tend to fade and get finished as bad, but he just always tends to not be able to get those finishes and thus leaves himself susceptible to all kinds of things. And Royval is a lot bigger guy. We're talking about a guy who's won 6 of 7. His only loss was to Casey Kenny, and Casey Kenny was hot for a while. That's a tough dude. I am high on Casey Kenny. Yes. And then to come in and finish Tim Elliott in your first fight, that was really impressive, because Tim Elliott's a tough dude. Look, I think Royval, his height, his size is going to pose some problems here. And if this one does go to the ground, because let's face it, with flyweights, I mean, you just get in crazy scrambles sometimes. If they do get into a scramble, Royval has a lot of different ways to end this. To me, it's kind of Kara France has one path, to dominate this fight and win it by decision, probably. But every other path to victory, a potential big knockout from the bigger guy or a submission in one of the grappling exchanges, all points toward Royval, and we're getting a big plus. I'm probably going to be on the dog here in this one.
Matt, I'm so happy you said that. I could not agree more. So something I do that's a little bit of a shtick, it's a little bit of a gimmick, but I've got the old faithful City Kickboxing parlay. When these guys are on the fight card all at the same time, I like to just string them all together, bet them all at the same time, and get a huge payout. The first time I did that, it was 7-1, I want to say, because that was before everyone knew about City Kickboxing. And now it doesn't pay nearly as well, because they're all these giant minus 200, minus 300 favorites. But this is the fight that stopped me from doing that. I wanted to tell everybody, you know what? All these fights are maybe a little bit wide on the lines, but the city kickboxing fighters should get it done. This is the one that made me go, you know what? I am not going to do my city kickboxing parlay because I legitimately think that Brandon Royval stands a good shot at winning this fight. I know he's the new kid on the block. I know he doesn't have as much experience, but I think we've seen the finished product of Kai Kara-France. I don't think he's going to get any better than he already is. And we've seen in his last couple of fights, there's really no improvements. And I know they call him Don't Blink Kai Kara-France, but that was only from his regional days. He doesn't knock out anybody at the UFC level. He just doesn't have that kind of pop in his punches. And one thing that I did see in his very, very questionable decision win. Let me pull his record up here because I'm blanking on the name. Julian Paiva. When he fought Julian Paiva, I thought he lost that fight. Now, granted, it was a split decision. That was UFC 234. That was Adesanya versus Silva. He got the hometown rub, I feel like, a little bit on that one. I thought Paiva won that fight. But what we saw was Paiva was more than capable of rolling and reversing Kai Kara-France every time he went in for a takedown. Royval is an excellent grappler. He sweeps, he uses submissions to get back to top position, he looks to take people's backs. I mean, this kid is just nasty on the mat. And Kai Kara-France does like to do that level change. He likes to make his opponents think about the wrestling. And if he puts himself in that kind of a position with a guy who only wants to grapple, I think it ends up on the mat sooner or later. And once it does, I really don't know if Kai Kara-France is going to have an answer for the type of offense that Brandon Royval is bringing to the table. I'm already on 2 dogs in this card.
Yeah, doesn't Royval remind you a little bit of a really short Nate Diaz? He's from Inglewood, California. He has that long, lanky body like Nate. You don't think he can strike, but all of a sudden he's hitting you from across. Yeah, he struts out like that. And suddenly, I remember when Cowboy fought Nate way back when they were both at 55, and suddenly Nate just outstruck Cowboy in a kickboxing match. And you're like, how did that happen? Royval has those skills. He has the length and skill to literally stand outside and out kickbox you from range. He's really long and he's really good. And just like the early days, Nate, you get into scrambles with this kid, and suddenly you're in a submission. He's throwing you in a triangle and throwing the double middle fingers to the crowd, Nate style. He just feels like a little short Nate Diaz to me. I love watching him fight. I think he's going to surprise some people. And I think he might sneak up on Kara-France here. Because I'm with you. I think he's peaked. I think we've seen everything he's got to give, where Royval, I think, has a lot of different levels.
I completely agree. What we've got right now is minus 235 on Kai Kara-France. Way too juiced, in my opinion. The comeback on Brandon Royval, he's out there anywhere between plus 180 and plus 200 I can see around the market. So right now, I don't think I can get my hands on plus 200, and that's what I want. We've got 400 live viewers on the show right now, so everybody, do me a favor. Don't run out and bet it yet. We want more money to come in on Kai Kara-France. We want to get a little bit wider of a line before we hit Brandon Royval. I'm fully planning on making this bet. And if I can give you just one more angle that I like on this fight, I love that you made the comparison of Royval to Diaz. Somebody who he reminds me a lot of is Brandon Moreno. Now, he doesn't have quite the sharp boxing of Brandon Moreno, but he's got that same warrior spirit, and he's got that same grappling ability. And if we go back to what I said about Paiva, I think that Kai Kara-France lost the fight against Paiva. He lost the fight against Brandon Moreno, too. He seems to struggle with these guys that have the range advantage on him, and he seems to struggle with these guys that are able to handle him on the mat, and I think that Brandon Royval poses those exact same problems. So it's not an official pick yet, because I'm hoping I can get a better line, but I'm playing Brandon Royval this weekend.
Yeah, I'm playing it regardless. Even if I can't get better, if I can only get 185 or 190, I like everything about him. I love watching him fight.
So I'm right there with you. I will absolutely take it, but I'm notoriously bad at reading the market. I always seem to think that people are going to see what I see, so I jump on these underdogs as quickly as I possibly can, trying not to lose out on that dog price tag. What I'm seeing right now, though, is the line is creeping wider. People are betting Kai Kara France. People are
Wow.
parlaying Kai Kara France. So because of that, I'm going to try to exercise a little bit of patience. And even though I'm more than happy on rolling the dice at plus 190, I wouldn't hate if I could get plus 210 or plus 220.
And maybe to your point, one of the things that maybe is going to benefit us getting a better line here is that City Kickboxing is one of the featured gyms.
That's a valid point. They are one of the featured gyms, and that's where I mentioned the hometown rub that they got. We're in Abu Dhabi this time. We're not in New
Yeah.
Zealand. We're not in Australia. We're not down under where these are the hometown fighters. We're in Abu Dhabi. And one thing that I noticed in Abu Dhabi, Matt, is that they are very, very favorable to fighters who have high volume and they count leg kicks. If you don't do anything with your grappling, they don't count as much for you. So these fighters that are blanket wrestlers, they don't do well in Abu Dhabi. You get fighters that are built honestly like the City Kickboxing guys, they score extremely well and we're winning fights that a lot of people were crying robbery on in Abu Dhabi. And I'm keeping that read in my back pocket for when we make these bets. The reason I'm okay with going against that here on Brandon Royval is because of the line and also because of the fact that I think Royval actually has an outside shot at finishing this fight. Because if it
Yeah.
gets to the mat, because he forces it to the mat, that's what he does. I absolutely think that he is live to get that kind of a finish. And you know what? I'm glad we mentioned that because that brings me back to our guy, Mean Hakeem Dawodu. That makes me want to bet on Mean Hakeem just a little bit because of the amount of offensive output he brings to the table. If he's in a close fight against his opponent, from what I remember with the judging over in Abu Dhabi, they probably give him that nod if it's a close fight.
Yeah, and going back to the finish ability of Brandon Royval, rarely do we see 125ers with finishing ability. His last 3 wins all by submission, 5 of his last 6 win by finish. This is a finishing machine in Brandon Royval.
Absolutely. He's got it. He has got it, and I think he's a hot prospect. I can't wait to see this kid work. All right. We have reached the big ones, the big two, the co-main event of the evening for the vacant light heavyweight strap. John Jones has stepped away from the UFC's light heavyweight division. Picking up the pieces here, we've got Dominick the Dominator Reyes taking on legendary Polish power Blachowicz. And this one is, again, it's kind of got me scratching my head a little bit. I'm a little bit confused. So I'm going to need your help here, Matt. Dominick Reyes, he is a young gun. He pushed John Jones to the absolute limit, a fight that a lot of people thought John Jones lost. But he's only 12-1. Now, he's constantly improving. He's got sharp hands, good boxing. He seems to be a thinker, and I like that about him. He's a very, very intelligent fighter that brings a good game to the cage. However, he does seem to get a little overexcited. I've seen him slow down in fights. He's struggled with, pacing himself out there, especially in a 5-round title fight. And he's taken on Jan Blachowicz. Now, Blachowicz has hand speed. This guy, I've made a lot of money on Jan in the last couple of years because he's just been knocking everybody out left and right. Everyone thinks he's over the hill and he's done, and he keeps proving them wrong. And I made a hot fire take about a year ago that Jan Blachowicz was going to be the one who dethroned John Jones. And that was a bold statement that I made. And I was hoping to get a shot at betting it just because I feel like he's incredibly underrated. And we've been getting these crazy wide lines. Now here we are. He's facing Dominick Reyes, a guy who doesn't have that championship shine on him. And I'm hesitating. I want to bet Jan in this spot. But for some reason, I am struggling to pull that trigger. How do you feel about this fight, Matt?
For whatever reason, people struggle to pull the trigger on Jan every single fight. You can make a case just from a pure odds standpoint, regardless of how we feel about fighters or what we think the public perception is about a fighter. Jan Blachowicz is the most underrated fighter in MMA. 9 of his last 11 fights, he's been an underdog. 9 of 11, yet he is 6-1, last 7 in the underdog role. This is a guy who continuously is made an underdog in every single fight, including, I think, his last 3. He was a pretty significant dog to Corey Anderson in his last and got the job done there. One of the greatest things that happened to Jan Blachowicz was that he got older. When he was younger, he always got into he's even said it, he got into this nervous feeling where, hey, I want to go out there and do what I do best, which is wrestle. But as he got a little older, he understood how tired wrestling made him. And so instead of always jumping to wrestle, he started letting his hands go early more and not rushing to wrestle. I would call it rushing in to wrestle first. And we've seen what's happened because of that. He's got some really impressive knockouts. And if you go to the ground of them, his submission game is, some of the best at 205. This guy is so underappreciated. How about 6-1 as an underdog? Your last 7, the only loss to Thiago Santos in a really closely lined fight. This guy's not only the dog in some, he was a big dog against Luke Rockhold. I mean, and he blasted Rockhold, and he was a big dog.
I destroyed that bet, Matt. Let me tell you, that was one of my proudest moments.
So, I mean, this is a guy I don't want to bet against because he's constantly an underdog, yet he constantly wins, which tells me that for whatever reason, the market doesn't appreciate Jan Blachowicz. The market doesn't appreciate Jan Blachowicz style. What I do like in this fight, because to your point, I also agree that Dominick Reyes is a thinker, is I like over 2.5 rounds minus 115. Look, Reyes is known as this devastating puncher, and he has 6 wins in the UFC, 7 fights. 4 of his, he only has 3 knockouts in those 6 wins in the UFC, and one of them against a blown-up middleweight in Chris Weidman, who had no business trying to fight at 205. So if we take that out, he only has 2 knockouts in the UFC, and he's not always a one-punch guy. And let's face it, Blachowicz coming off that devastating knockout of Corey Anderson, that's going to have Dominick Reyes' attention here. He knows he has a speed advantage. He knows he has a reach advantage. My guess is he's going to try to use that. And I don't think we're going to see a quick one-punch KO in the first or second round. I'm actually going to play this one over. I think either one of them could catch the other late, but I think early they're both going to be a little nervous. They're both going to be attentive. First title fight for Blachowicz, only second title fight for Reyes. A lot on the line here. I wouldn't be surprised if they both come out a little slow. They're both naturally not big one-punch KO guys. I think we get over 2.5 rounds here.
I love that angle here, man. And especially, again, we've got to say it. We're back in the big cage. We're in Abu Dhabi. These are light heavyweights. They're going to have room to move. They're not going to be forced to get in there and slug it out with one another unless they really want to. Now, Jan has said that he is predicting a round 2 KO. But Dominick Reyes, he is 7 years younger, and he's never lost by finish. I don't expect that that's necessarily going to be the way that it gets done. They've got an equal reach advantage, I think, when it comes to the boxing exchanges. They're both going to be kind of looking to stick and move. And as much as I love the legendary Polish power mark, Jan's only knocked out the chinniest fighters in the UFC. So Dominick Reyes, like you said, Chris Weidman, what a joke. Like that was a resume-building win for Dominick Reyes, and he should have been a minus 1,200 favorite in that spot. It never should have happened. It was ridiculous. And then Jan, same thing. How he was ever an underdog to Luke Rockhold, I will never know. Like I said, one of my favorite bets of all time was betting Jan Blachowicz by knockout in that spot. And then he knocks out Corey Anderson. I know Corey Anderson has been on a solid run as of late, but he actually just dipped out to Bellator because he can't take these power punchers anymore here in the UFC. So these guys are both going up against somebody with a chin. And everybody is going to take this back to Thiago Santos. Jan got knocked out by Thiago Santos, so we've seen him get clipped. But I watched that fight, Matt, and he got stunned. But he didn't have his eyes rolled in the back of his head. He wasn't flat on his back staring up at the lights. That was not a devastating knockout. The referee stepped in and saved him, but he was actually intelligently defending himself. Even when he was on the ground, he had his palm out and he was catching every single punch that Thiago was throwing at him. We know Thiago Santos, that dude does not let up. The referee saved Jan in that spot, but it doesn't make me question his chin. I'm with you. I like the over 2.5 here in this spot, and honestly, that's probably a much better way of playing it so you don't have to sweat who ends up winning this thing because, like you said, I don't want to step in front of Jan Blachowicz myself.
No, I mean, that has been a recipe to lose a lot of money, stepping in front of, because that means, A, you're betting a favorite every time because he's always an underdog, and then he always wins, so you're losing all those bets betting on favorites. I think if you would bet on against Jan his last 11 fights, you'd pretty much have lost your bankroll.
It's true. It's absolutely true, and I'm disappointed I didn't have the guts to pull the trigger on him against Corey Anderson. I've been backing him for a long time, but I faltered when he faced Corey Anderson, and that was a recency bias issue for me after seeing what Corey did to Johnny Walker. So that I got caught. That was my bad, but. I'll probably have to put a little something on Jan by knockout just for a little sprinkle because he might have that magic touch right now.
Or what about Jan by sub? Because the one thing I do think is that Dominick's chin's pretty good and his stand-up's pretty good, but we haven't had a chance to see what happens when Dominick goes to the ground. Let's say these guys end up somehow they get tripped up together early and before they get really sweaty. Jan's submission game is really good. If I was going to take one of those big flyer bets, like 10 or 12, better than 7-1, it might be Jan by sub.
And it's not out yet, obviously, but you'll probably be getting 18-1 or something like that because that is absolutely going to be something that nobody sees coming. That's not going to be no one's going to see that one coming. I like that. That's worth a sprinkle. All right, we have made it, folks. It is time for the main event, and we lost our guest right as I was about to reintroduce him here. Let's give it just a second because Matt actually was able to get his internet rolling and got him right back in no time at all. So we have 442 live viewers tonight on the podcast. Thank you all so much for hanging out with me. I have Matt Holt here with me from, just an absolutely incredible person. And I like to interact with the chat a whole lot more than this. You all know that, but I like to give my full attention to my guests. So I appreciate you all bearing with me through this one and not interacting as much as I normally do. Do me a favor. This is Odds HQ. Make sure you subscribe here. Give the video a like if you wouldn't mind. And give me a follow over at Die Hard MMA Pod. We love having you guys here, and we're just pumping out as much content as possible. Let me go ahead and reintroduce my guest, Matt Holt. Thank you for joining the show, my friend.
Having some crazy Wi-Fi issues at the office. I don't know what happened, but...
It's all right. We got you back quick, and you know what? We're about to wrap this one up and put a bow on it. We've got the main event. Israel Adesanya taking on Paulo Costa, two undefeated fighters. We talked about this at the very beginning of the show. It is so rare that you get two legitimately undefeated fighters. And not only that, the stakes are so high, they're scrapping over a belt this weekend. I love this fight, Matt.
I love this fight, too. I think... Look, I can't be any more excited about this fight. And, I had some issues with Costa's resume and level of competition coming up. And I thought, look, Johnny Hendricks was tailor-made. Again, we talk about middleweights or welterweights coming up to middleweight. Either way, much smaller guy and a shot fighter at that point, Johnny Hendricks. And, he won the Uriah Hall fight in an amazing fashion, but he was also eating huge damage in that fight. And the problem is, in most of these fights with people that are really good technical strikers like Uriah Hall, Paulo Costa has been really hittable. Now, he didn't get hit as much in the Yoel Romero fight, but Yoel Romero doesn't punch back anymore at this point in his career. He's so old and scary looking, he just stands there and looks scary at people. I mean, Yoel Romero needs to retire. So I also think that Costa win's a little bit overrated there. I wonder what is going to happen with maybe the most technical striker at middleweight that we've seen since Anderson Silva in his prime starts laying it on Paulo Costa here. Is he going to be able to handle that? Because I remember Anderson Silva in his prime. What happens when you have the most creative, precision striker in all of MMA? I mean, he knocked out Forrest Griffin with a jab. I mean, his shots were so amazing. And Adesanya is at that level where he doesn't have to look like he's throwing everything into it. He's just so precise with where he hits you. I feel like Costa early on has to land something big. And if he doesn't, I think it's going to be all Adesanya.
I'm kind of there with you, but I am a little bit spooked. So one thing we talk about on the show is that we know that it's rare that the experts in Vegas make a mistake. And this fight was opened as a pick'em.
Yeah.
The sharps, the smart boys and girls out there, they have been on Israel Adesanya his entire run. Everybody knows how good this kid is. and the bookmaker opened him at minus 135. I'm a little spooked at this point that the line is too wide, and you've got a guy whose nickname is the Eraser. He does nothing but just unload these giant damaging shots, 11 wins by knockout, and I have the same exact concerns with Paulo Costa's resume that you do. In fact, if you see my article over at Odds HQ, I mentioned that exact thing. I was not sold on Paulo Costa, and I bet Yoel Romero when they fought, fully expecting he was not going to be able to take that step up and not be successful against this caliber of a fighter. Boy, did he prove me wrong. Every single question I had about Paulo Costa was answered in that fight. He took the best shots that Yoel Romero, arguably one of the hardest hitters in the UFC, had to offer. He did it for a full 15 minutes. He set a personal record with how many significant strikes he threw in that fight and landed in that fight. The question here for me is the big cage. If he can't hunt down Israel Adesanya, Adesanya is going to play the outside and he's going to pick him apart. But I think the durability of Paulo Costa is going to surprise a whole lot of people. The shots he was able to eat and just keep on walking through against Uriah Hall and Yoel Romero. I know Izzy hits hard. I know he's super precise. I know he's very, very accurate. But I don't know that I want to lay minus 170 in this spot.
Well, what about 2.5 rounds over minus 120 then? Because at the end of the day, if Costa can eat those shots and hang in there, at some point, if you're Israel Adesanya and you get through 3 rounds and you're winning because you're counter punching and your elusiveness, I think you start to go into damage control, risk management late in that fight where, hey, I just want to, and at that point you're over anyway. You're over the 2.5 anyway. And I feel like for him, if he can get out of the way of that charging bull the first couple of rounds, then he's going to have a recipe for an easy decision win. And sometimes you just take that. Maybe 2.5 over minus 20 is the way to play it.
That's the way I'm looking, Matt. That's exactly the spot that I'm going to take on this fight because I don't think this fight is going to end in round 1. Very similarly to the last fight that we talked about, we've got 2 guys that the stakes have never been higher, and we know when opponents respect one another's power, they tend to be a little bit more cautious to start the fight. They take a little longer to find that range. And I know that Costa is a bit of a fast starter, but if he whiffs on 1 or 2 shots and gets clipped by Izzy, he's going to slow down and lock it up a little bit quicker. He'll get that respect and he'll slow it down a bit. I do think that this fight stands a very, very good chance of getting over that 2.5. Maybe even you take an outside shot at the alternate total if you can get a 3.5. I don't know if it makes it all the way to the judges' scorecards, but we've seen a spot like this with John Jones time and time and time again, and I know a lot of people make comparisons between Israel Adesanya and John Jones. I'm not super quick to be doing that, but in this kind of a spot, he does like to play with his food a little bit. More often than not in the UFC, he's been a decision fighter than a knockout fighter, and the only fighters that he's really been destroying and knocking out fast and early have been guys that have been a little bit chinny. And even though you've got guys like Whitaker, whose durability have been on, display for the last couple of years, you can only take that kind of punishment so much. I feel like that was a tailor-made spot for Izzy to get the knockout. I think this one goes over.
You know what? I'm starting to like it more and more too. Look, 5 of his 8 so he's 8-0 in the UFC. 5 of his 8 UFC wins come by decision. 3 of his 4 last wins come by decision. So his most recent form when he's fighting basically the toughest guys in his career tend to go the distance. 5 of 8 wins in the UFC tend to go the distance. Yet we're almost even money here to go halfway in this fight. I think the value's squarely on the over, and I'm certainly going to be betting over 2.5 rounds.
I like it, Matt. And I like even more that you and I are on the same page on this one. So I just want to go ahead and recap for those of you listening. My card so far for UFC 253 is I've locked in bets on Danielo Marquez, William Knight. Both of those, in my opinion, are dog or pass spots, and I'm going to go ahead and take the dogs and throw a couple flyers out there. I am fully intending on betting Brandon Royval as a dog. I think there might be an opportunity for a bet on Shane Young. We're looking at potentially the under on Jake Matthews and Diego Sanchez. We're looking at maybe Hakeem Dawodu if the line gets a whole lot wider in that spot. Again, maybe the under. I'm contemplating Ketlen Viera, and we're waiting for that line to get wider on Brandon Royval, like I mentioned. And then the over in the co and main event. That's where I'm looking, Matt. If you want to go ahead and let the people know, what have you already bet or what are you intending to bet at this point? The floor is yours.
Yeah, Jeff Hughes for me. I'm going to take Jeff Hughes plus 240 in a spot against a guy in Espino where he's now 39 years old, hasn't fought in 2 years, and I think Hughes might be able to catch him here. So I'm taking Hughes at the plus 240 range. And then for me, I'm taking Kamer and Knight under 1.5 rounds. I just think these are two really big guys who are going to get after it here. And somebody's probably going to go to sleep early. I'm joining you. I think I'm probably going to end up on Jake Matthews under, because when you get a minus 700 favorite with the durability of Sanchez at 38 years old on the other side, I think if you can make a case that minus 700 feels right, then you also have to expect that that's not going to go the distance, and thus under 2.5 at plus 160 feels pretty good in that situation. And then I'm on the over again with you in the main and co-main, and definitely taking Brandon Royval in the plus 200 range, hopefully.
I like it. And Matt, honestly, I'm going back to what I talked about with the judging in Abu Dhabi. I think maybe I need to see the weigh-ins and see how these guys come into shape. But if there's one guy who's going to stick and move and use leg kicks and be the volume striker, it's Jeff Hughes. We might have another live dog spot that I might be joining you on. So keep in touch for that one, everybody in the chat. We've got 450 viewers. Thank you all so much for breaking down UFC 253 with us this evening. That's the show. Massive shout out and thank you to you, Matt, for joining us on these pay-per-view cards. We love having you. The floor is yours. If you have anybody you want to shout out, let the people know where they can find you on Twitter or anything like that. Go right ahead.
No, thanks, Clint. I appreciate it. At Matthew Holt, VP. Best of luck, everybody, with this card. And this is going to be one of the really special ones. Hopefully we'll be as excited after as we are right now.
I think we got a lot of live dogs, so this one, I'm excited. Whenever we can bet on underdogs, that's my favorite way to play it. So hopefully some of these big dogs come through for us, and good luck with all your action, everybody. We will be having the Total Madness video coming out on Thursday. As always, I'll do my post-weigh-in recap on Friday, looking to see if we can get any last-second reads. And then, of course, Saturday, I know everyone's betting on NBA, baseball, and football out there, so good luck with all that action. Subscribe here to Odds HQ. Make sure you keep your chin up out there and keep swinging. It's hard for everybody right now, but if we stay positive, make sure you're a positive influence on the people around you, it's going to pay off. Everybody have a wonderful evening, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks, Clint. Thanks.